just joining us on Facebook Live. I'm Lauren Benheimer from RDU on Stage, and I am passing the baton to Jesse, who is going to moderate this incredible panel. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I cannot wait to hear this conversation. So, if you have any questions, please post them in the Facebook comments, and I will forward them to Jesse and have fun.
Cool. Thanks, Lauren. So hi, everyone. My name is Jesse Gephardt. I'm a local actor, director in the area, and I'm joined by a group of wonderful men for this panel. There is a panel at 7 o'clock full of women that will be moderated to follow ours, so please stay tuned for that when we're done. But I just want to give everyone an opportunity here to start just by introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and like the Cliff's Notes version of like kind of how you got to where you are. And just so in the interest, we'll kind of start alphabetically, which would be with Kenneth.
Okay. Well, I got into the field in 1997 after I got my master's in theater at University of California, Santa Barbara, where I also worked as a television production director. And so once I retired and came back to North Carolina, where I grew up, I started teaching theater at Shaw University and continued the tradition of the Shaw players. And so I worked there until 2017, when I retired from there. So I retired from University of California, and I'm retired from Shaw University. I'm still working. I now currently teaching at North Carolina Central University as a full-time professor, and I've been there as a part-time professor since 2004. So it's not really new. It's just I just took on full-time duties after I retired from Shaw. I'm also the artistic director of Agape Theater Project, and we were in our third season. And as you know, the third season didn't kick off because the first show was supposed to be Crowns at Burning Coal Theater in May, directed by Tara Hodge, who also directed it at Raleigh Little Theater. But we were going to put a different spin on it because it was on a different stage. So a thrust stage. But anyway, that show has been rescheduled for August, the first week in August. We haven't started publicity yet, but we will. We also were doing Ethel, which I don't think is going to happen, which is July 24th through the 26th. It was supposed to be at North Carolina Central University Theater, and currently we are not open. I'm teaching theater classes online right now, 2 summer school classes. So we're going to look at that and probably rescheduling that. We may have to scrap the whole season. If we do, we'll just start with the 2021 season and add these 2 shows in there. But basically, I've been doing theater and kind of now into a role of hiring directors, but I do still direct and I still act. I was in Trouble in Mind in last summer, and I played Sheldon. And that was the last acting gig I did, but I have been acting. Once you get that, you get bitten, you have to get on stage every once in a while. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
Excellent. Thank you. Tim.
I am Tim Locklear. I'm the managing artistic director for North Raleigh Arts and Creative Theater. And it started out as part-time. I have been in theater since high school and did a lot of community theater where I'm from. And when I came to the Raleigh area, I got my start at Raleigh Little Theater, stage managing and being on stage, and fell into the the managing director job at NRAC and just celebrated my 6th year there. Also, like Kenneth just said, when you've been bitten, the last thing I did, I was King, Darling, and Cinderella for 3 years at Raleigh Little Theater, which was great to get my feet wet, but my true love is directing. And so we're entering, as everyone knows, this was supposed to be our 19th season. We're getting ready to go in at Interact, and we're waiting to see when we can start and how our season will start off.
Thank you. Mike.
Oh, yeah. Hey, everybody, Mike Mcgee. I'm a freelancer from a directing perspective. I'm currently directing Lobby Hero at Forest Moon Theater in Wake Forest. I'm also the director of Cinderella at Raleigh Little Theater. Not when Tim was there, though, unfortunately. And I was supposed to direct Clue at Carrie Player, so I had a busy year planned from a directing perspective, but Clue's already been pushed out to 2021 for Carrie Players. I came to directing through the stage management ranks, so I was a pretty active stage manager. Did a lot at Raleigh Little Theater, Theater in the Park. Was the stage manager of Cinderella for about 5 years. But during that time, I also got to I'd say I kind of took a role of assistant directing and stage managing some at the end, especially for Linda Young, rest her soul, and Haskell with Cinderella the last couple of years. And then the last 2 years of stage managing, I was almost exclusively doing professional shows with Theater Raleigh. So I got to work with a lot of amazing directors like yourself, Jesse Gephardt, and Richard Rowland and Tito Hernandez. And so it was like a master class every time I stage managed. And then I took a 2-year break to be I thought it was going to be a 2-year break from stage managing to be the president of Raleigh Little Theater, and did a lot more acting during that time. I kind of told Charles I wouldn't take any paid jobs during that time, but I did some acting, community theater acting. And then right at the end of my 2 years at Raleigh Little Theater, Bob Baird, who's the artistic director of Forest Moon, asked me if I wanted to direct The Curious Savage, which was a show he saw me in. And I said, sure, let's give it a shot. And then caught the bug. And I've been on stage a couple times since then, but I've almost exclusively been directing since then. So I just love it. Yeah, it's my fave.
Thanks. All right, Joseph.
Oh, yes. Let's see. I started at undergraduate at Northwestern, started directing a little bit there, went to the University of Cincinnati and the College Conservatory of Music, then ended up at USC, and stayed in LA for about 15 years, where I started a bunch of theaters, including a theater called Words Across Cultures. From there, I got a job in the theater, which was like, for me, a dream to work and get paid as a staffer, as an artistic director at Playwrights Theater of New Jersey. And I focused a lot on working with playwrights and then new plays. I was able to transfer a very successful LA production called Men on the Verge of a His Panic Breakdown. And from there to New York City, and did an off-Broadway show there. And that ran about 8 months in New York. And stayed at Playwrights Theater for about 6 years. And then took a little ride to UNLV, and then came back, and my partner and I were working in 330 square feet in New York City together. We lived and worked there because I'd left the theater at Playwrights, and decided to move to North Carolina, where her father bought some land, and we built a house on some of that land. And I said, okay, I'll job out. And I ended up landing both as a co-artistic director and now artistic director of Street Sign Center for Literature. And I ended up getting a position at UNC, Chapel Hill in Performance Studies, where I'm still running that program. And I run a new work development program called the Process Series. And I just, I direct around. I've been at Raleigh Little Theater with Blood Done Sign My Name. And so I've been able to direct both for Street Signs and a bunch of theaters locally, a lot of Man Bites Dog before they closed.
Awesome. Great. Patrick.
I'm Patrick Taurus, the artistic director of Raleigh Little Theater. I've been here now about 5.5 years, which feels like a while, but it still seems pretty new. There's still a lot to learn, a lot to do. I grew up in West Texas, was a football player, saw my brother in a play and kind of got bitten by the bug. Got to direct my first play as a senior. Our drama teacher decided be a cool senior project to make us direct something, and that was awesome. Then I went to college as a pre-pharmacy major because that's what I really wanted to do, but I just couldn't stop the call towards the theater building. So did that, went to grad school at the University of Southern Mississippi, and then got an internship after that. I was the directing and casting fellow at the Shakespeare Theater Company in Washington, D.C. Got to spend a year like assisting some amazing folks. At the end of that year, I did the Drama League. I was accepted into that program in Ithaca. And then came back to DC and really started teaching. and that kind of led to the next like 10 years of my career, which was working with youth to tell their own stories. And a majority of that work was in the juvenile detention systems, both in Washington, D.C. and in Austin, Texas, before I moved here. So really come at theater kind of from a perspective of social change and social justice, just because of all those wonderful young folks that I got to work with telling their own stories. So that's what led me here.
Excellent. And Eric.
Hey, I'm Eric Woodall. And thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Lauren, for having all of us. This is a treat. I am originally from North Carolina, from Benson, and I started doing theater when I was 9 years old in this area. And I went to college. I got my drama degree at Carnegie Mellon, and then moved to New York directly from there, and worked as an actor for many years, and segued into directing. I've always kept a close contact with North Carolina and this area. As an actor and as a director, I was fortunate to work at Playmakers several times, and there was a period of time where I came back to North Carolina for a bit, and I directed shows here. That's how I first met Jesse when he was in high school, and but New York, I have lived in for about 27 years. And so I was directing, but then I got this opportunity to be a casting director with Tara Rubin in New York. So I was one of the Broadway casting directors. And that took most of my time for 16 years, but I did a lot of teaching during that time. And I also continued to direct around the country, most specifically at some of the theaters here in North Carolina. Again, keeping that connection because of family and friends and a love of the arts here. And then I became one of the resident directors on Broadway and Mamma Mia, as well as on tour and in Las Vegas. I was at a place of wondering what's next, and I don't know, wanting new challenges. So being able to come to North Carolina Theater, where I presently am, and to become the producing artistic director was, it felt like this amazing full circle moment, because I did work at North Carolina Theater when I was in high school, and to be able to bring some of the experience that I've had and be this bridge, and to bring it back to this area and to North Carolina Theater. So that's where I currently am.
Great, thank you. One of the things I like about this group is that we all do the same thing, but we all have kind of come to it on very different paths. And we have all kind of learned a lot along our way. And, we're in different levels of experience and kind of like scope and scale. And so I'm excited to kind of have this conversation, I'm excited to have this conversation with all of you, knowing how diverse we are and how we got here. So I'm gonna start just by asking like a very broad kind of like eye roll question that I encourage you all to kind of pop in if you have other thoughts on it. But I'm interested to know, just kind of like, for you, what is directing? And like, do you carry a philosophy or a mantra as a director? Does anyone kind of want to start a response to that?
I'm happy to, Jesse. The
Great.
least experience. I'll be the least experienced one. Will go first. I think my mantra is collaboration. I go into most of the shows knowing that I don't know everything, and I think my job is to set the overall kind of starting point from a vision perspective, and then shape it from there. But I believe in, everyone I work with has an equal say as far as the other creatives on the team and the actors even, although you have to, limit that to a certain degree at times, or you'll never get moving forward. But I think it's really that kind of leadership around collaboration is where I try to take it from. And especially my Cinderella team. I mean, every one of them is a partner to me. It's not like I'm any more important than them. And so I really try to just drive that collaboration, because there's stuff that I, as being where I am in my career as a director, would never even think of that comes up, either from actors or from the creative team, that if I just limited that, we'd probably never find it and come to that. So I try to keep a welcoming, opening environment and just really push that collaboration aspect.
I would piggyback off of that. I love that. And I think being a director is bringing the most talented group of people together that you possibly can, behind the table, in front of the table, and then trusting that they are going to be at their best. And then you're there to guide. Preparation is probably the most important thing to me in directing. And with the shows that we do at NCT, we have 12 days of rehearsal. So you have to like be prepared. And I can sniff in 2 seconds if I have an actor who has instincts to do things, or an actor who's like, tell me where to next, boss. And so that level of preparation has to be there to work together. I'll
piggyback on that too, because being a director for me is almost like being a conductor of a symphony. You've got all these elements that you have to bring together, and all of them have to be hitting at the same time. And costumes, lighting, props, acting. And for me, that's one of the reasons why I started Agape, because I like working with professional actors. When I'm working with student actors, I almost have to teach acting and teach the play. So it's kind of burdensome there to actually have to teach acting while you're trying to pull a show together. But yeah, just bringing all the elements together, seeing that set being built, and then just seeing that set being built, and you're rehearsing on a bare stage, and then seeing that set being built, and then finally seeing the actors in this space is something really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot about the sort of the modern trend towards composition, and I think that's what directors do. They're composing all of this energy together.
Right.
I totally agree that you get the best, absolutely the best actors, the best people. When you think about a role, who's best for a role, I always go with the best actor. Necessarily the look of an actor. And sort of trusting that, and then sort of being the one who's sort of pulling the ideas and calling them my own, because I've used theirs because they were better. But
I think,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to piggyback on the collaboration part. I think being in a community theater environment is very important for me to collaborate with those artists who most are just getting stipends and not a professional salary, that they come to the table, whether it's an actor, a technician, an artist. It's all about the collaboration for me. But the biggest thing for me, and my mentor taught me, is to always stay true to what the playwright has written, stay true to the story. And I think that's my first, if I have a mantra, that is my mantra in collaboration and staying true to the story.
Hear, hear.
Patrick, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I agree with everybody. I mean, collaboration for sure. I also think, like, ultimately, I mean, it's like all these C words, right? It's collaboration and chemistry, communication, and community to me. Because I think that the successful communication of a story requires, like everyone's saying, like whatever metaphor we're using, it's elements. It's like putting elements to me, I call that chemistry, like started as the chemistry major. It's putting elements together to create something. And how do you put those elements together to make something happen on stage that ultimately communicates across from stage to the audience? I think that one of the things I've been saying a lot lately in the middle of the world that we live in right now is like theater to me is meant to shrink the distance between human beings. And so like that's one of the things that makes this all so hard, is like the natural instinct for me as a director is to say, how do we pull towards each other through all of these stories and all these characters? And that also creates a chemistry. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I would add to that is chemistry and communication.
And just one more thing that what
Yeah.
Tim said, dramaturgy, because I'm a new play director, I choose my plays very carefully. I trust my playwrights just as I would trust an actor, and getting into the center of the play and having all that creation come out of what the play is doing dramaturgically is a really essential part of the craft of at least of my direction.
What I'm interested to know specifically, I mean, Patrick and Joseph, you both spoke about it, but does anyone else have experience with kind of creating or devising theater in a group? I mean, I've never personally done it. I'd love to hear a little bit about what, as a director, what that experience is like for those that have taken part in it. What is that like? Maybe Joseph or Patrick, one of you want to speak to it?
I think I think what I bring to it is knowing good structure, knowing dramatic structure. So in a sense, if you don't have a playwright and you're developing something in the room, you become sort of the ad hoc playwright. And you have to trust your sense of knowing how to create the journey, and from looking and working with other incredible dramatists. So it feels to me like it has the same issues. There are some devising companies that are erratic and create works that are sometimes not as comprehensible as maybe more traditional dramatic structures. I tend to be more attracted to the journey and making sure that the audience is brought along and is sucked into the experience, so that that becomes sort of my job. I become the if there is not a playwright in the room, which often there are in devised situations, you really then must sort of also be director and playwright. You must sort of shape the journey.
Yeah, the work that I was doing mostly was with like the incarcerated youth. It's just a little bit different. I think Joseph is right. We were never creating those plays with the intention of producing them for large audiences. We were creating those plays to help them understand agency and how to make sure that their characters understood that they had the power over their own decisions and actions that they took throughout the journey of a play, and then how hopefully that then translated to them, because oftentimes with those young people, they blamed everybody else but themselves on what got them in trouble or whatever. And so we were really using theater to teach agency. In the times like in my professional career where I've worked on new plays, what Joseph said is like absolutely true. It's like the better understanding you have a structure, I think the better you're equipped to help and assist a playwright kind of give birth to their baby. That's the way I think structure is a way a director can really help midwife a thing.
Yeah.
To come to life.
I love that. So kind of in that same vein of creation and starting, I'm going to ask Eric, because I have experienced this from him. And so when you get a new project, how do you start? Where do you start? And Eric, if you could just speak a little bit about what you do when you get a new project, and then if anyone else wants to speak afterwards, please feel free.
I think a new project, I mean, I certainly start with reading it over and over. And if it's a musical, if it's existing music, which it normally is, I listen to it over and over, and I just brainstorm and try to dream. And for me, I have to see it. I have to see it, and it starts to come. It's funny. People have sometimes said that I'm an actress director, which I love hearing because I love actors. But I always think that means from the inside out, and which is great. But I think of myself more as the outside in. because I have to see sort of the physical production or the idea of what we're going to do with it, or how we're telling the story. So once I do that, that's it starts to fall into place. And you have to let it cook, and you have to let it simmer. I've also sometimes gotten what was a great idea, and you feel like, oh God, it can't just fly on that one idea. Like that might have gotten me the job, but then you've got to like deliver. And once that surprise element of where it's set or how you're staging it or whatever is, the audience is over that, you got to tell the story. And so I think that's the way I approach it, and start in the beginning. I do a lot of research. I am really big with visuals, and so lots of pictures work really well for me, and I carry those into the room. With most of the shows I direct, I don't work with a dramaturg, and so I do some of that work on my own to help me, really, and then I share it with the company once we gather.
Who else wants to talk about how you get started on a show?
Well, I also do a stage reading of the play, but by me being a teacher, I've taught a lot of plays, and we're always looking at structure and dramaturg, and I have to get the cast to see what I see, and the moments I see, the characters that I see, and so getting them to hear, when you hear the play, it's like radio, right? Back in the day when we didn't have TV and everybody just heard the play. When you hear the play, you start to hear the characters start to flush out and what they're saying. Because, being on stage, you have to make people believe that you're that character. So I start out with hopefully letting my cast see who they are. And then we can put it in the context of where it is.
Nice.
One of the things I just forgot one little thing since I
Go
was
ahead.
saying that one. That I do like to do, and I think is kind of odd, I guess. But I feel like, and maybe it's because I was an actor first, but I feel like I have to be inside of all the characters. I read it like them, and if I'm doing blocking, I have to be them and do the blocking. And it's a fine line, because then when you get into the real thing, you don't want to give line readings or tell somebody exactly how to do it. But I have to feel like I've been there first, so that I can properly guide.
Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead.
I'm very much like Eric. I'm more visual, so I need to see the play, and I also like to focus on the characters as well. So, I read it a few times, but then, hopefully I have an idea of what the set may look like by talking to people. So I start to kind of sketch it out, like what I see and I'm not a micromanager from a blocking perspective, but I at least like to feel and touch what I think we're going to be doing once we get on that stage. And I do a ton of research also. I love to read any interviews from the playwright that I can find to just get their perspective on that. I also like to read other reviews, not because it influences what I'm going to personally do, but I just like to see what's out in the universe. I'm stubborn in that I almost do the opposite of what I've seen or read, just to be stubborn, but I do like to soak in all the material that I can find out there from a research perspective. And a lot of times you get, especially if it's like an original production, you get a lot of information from the original director and playwright during that time. So,
yeah.
I'm very big on research also. In fact, I'm reading 3 books about a play I'm supposed to direct. If and when, with the view upstairs, about the upstairs lounge, I'm reading 3 different books right now. But a big thing for me when I'm creating and once the cast is in place, or if time allows and it's the show, is the table reading, is doing a lot of table work, especially with plays. Mothers and Sons is a perfect example for me. 60% of that show was done around a table, talking about the characters, putting them together. And I've even done it with 2 musicals, with Next to Normal and Spring Awakening, sitting down, talking, when you ordinarily don't get a chance to do it with musicals. I feel like where a lot of people are visual, I internalize myself as these characters, and then the visions come to place as I'm reading it more and more. I'm much more internalized as a director with the characters than visual, I think.
Patrick or Joseph?
I think the only thing I'd like to add is that thing called the new play. I feel like I've developed for myself a very strong sense of the way I would like to work on a play, and it takes some time, some early readings with really good actors really help. Having longer discussions with the playwright, the very beginning of the process when you're actually into production. And I think each stage is really important. There's like a workshopping of a play. I've come to believe that staged readings are unhelpful a little bit, because watching an actor both have a cup of coffee and a script in their hand and try to figure out which is which, they drink from the script instead of the coffee. But you know, they've been doing those stage readings at O'Neill for many years. So, but to just sort of have these phases in which you, and especially if you can stay with the playwright as a director over time, you get more and more inside the play. And then finally, the production becomes the last part of that process, because until you have a production, as everyone has said about responding to a play visually, till you have those elements, the scenographic elements and the production, you're really not you're getting to the final stages of a new play development. You need that production to find out how it feels like when it moves in space, and how that space and how that play, you know, come together. So I just think that having the luxury of having those steps is really important in a new play process.
I'll approach that answer to that, because I agree with everything that everybody said is kind of similar to, in terms of once we get into the process. For me, I'm also visual. I love research, and of course, like trying to understand character and things like that. But I'll just kind of approach your question from a different angle, which is like, as a producer, like how do I select a show? Which is like, what is the initial kind of motivating reason to even entertain putting a show on a season or on the stage? And so I think the beginning, if that's kind of the very beginning of the process for me, in the role that I have, I would say I believe that at the heart of every play is one question. I mean, I didn't make that up. I can't remember who I stole that from. I think it may have been Anne Bogart, but that there's one question at the heart of like most plays. And like, if you can find that question, which is like, what is the cost of revenge, or whatever it might be, is that question interesting to an audience? If it's a classic play, is the answer to that question different now through our modern lens? Mm-hmm. Or is it a question that needs to be asked again because we need to hear it again? We need to live through that question again. And so I think that for me, that's the kind of journey I take in the beginning, to even consider like whether or not something should be considered as part of a season of work. And then after like figuring out what that question is, and if I think the community could benefit from that answer to that question, or not even the answer, but the wrestling with that question, then I go, okay, well, whose voice should tell this story? Because it's often not mine, you know? And so then that's how you start selecting directors and people to work on it. So it's just a different way to answer your question.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, because I actually had that as kind of like, because we have a lot of producers here, we have a lot of people that do this, that select whole seasons. And so let's just kind of shift over into that world. So for those that are responsible for choosing seasons of shows, I mean, what are you looking for in this area? I mean, our area has changed and grown so much in the 20 years that I've been here. And so when you're thinking about a season of shows, like what exactly are you trying to do? Are you trying to create a through line? Are you looking to challenge what would be considered your base audience? Like what are your goals when choosing seasons?
Well, I think all the things that you mentioned, I mean, for you know, the realities of the nonprofit world, we have to think about keeping the doors open. And we have to think about what people are going to want to come see. And it's been interesting being here just a little while and doing the audience polls and stuff, and also seeing what they respond to. I do think it's important to push the limits. I think it's important to know the boundaries, at least right now, because baby steps can go a long way, because it can be a marathon, not a sprint. But I certainly think about an overall arc or theme that people might not be aware of it, and that's fine. You know, the first season I did here, it was every musical was about, and play was about acceptance at a different level. And our next season is about finding your own voice and flying with that. So it all fits into that. And I think, but then I think of it from lots of different ways. Do you have a comedy? Do I have a lot of dancing? Am I representing many different ethnic groups? You know, and is there an opportunity, even if it's not, here's an African-American show, here's an Asian show, even if it's not cut like that, are there shows here that can be cast in very open-minded ways, which is casting, but to redefine some quote unquote white parts. And so is there a lot of opportunity here to re-examine and to re-explore and to challenge and entertain? So I think I can speak, I think we would all be in agreement that this is a huge part of our job, because there's a lot of pressure put on how those selections are made. And you know, I run it past people, and I don't let them know that's what I'm doing. But like, if you were going to see this or this, like, which one would you choose and why? So that helps.
Well, you know, I have to choose a season, but I'm a small production company, so I have to make sure I'm going to break even or at least make some money, right? So this past season, the 2019 season, was a phenomenal season. We opened up with Dance on Woodall's Row, which was a play that was done at the Raleigh Little Theater in 2003. And I was in the cast in 2003, sold out every show in 2003. I did it again in 2010 at North Carolina Central University, sold out every show. And this last season, did it at Burning Coal Theater. Every show was nearly sold out for 2 weeks. And then if I could have done a next week, which I couldn't, I could have done another week of it. But you got to have a comedy, and you got to have serious plays, and you got to have things that reflect. And the second play I did was Trouble in Mind, which is about Alice Childress, which I was in. And it was a story about a play within a play, which was Black and white actors coming together in the 50s doing a play, and how they had to overcome racism in the rehearsal process. And then the third one was a play which was an original play written when I was in graduate school by my colleague she wrote Sweet Mama String Bean, The Life and Times of Ethel Waters. And I found a phenomenal singer, Phyllis Morrison, and she tore the house down. Everybody wanted to go. So it was so successful in Durham. I had to move it to Raleigh at the Burning Coal Theater for a weekend. Successful there. So choosing a season is really important to make sure that you don't lose money. And some shows do lose money, but you want to give something that people want to see. And I have a special audience. When they come, they know what they're going to get. And so that's what we want to do, is give them what they want.
Awesome.
I have to piggyback on what Eric said. And I know I've had this conversation, especially with Patrick, about keeping the doors open when we're in a commercial space, when you're planning a season. But I think with everything we're going through right now, I think it's kind of ironic that the season for this year is called Discovering Courage and Taking Risk, because we're all in courage and risk right now. And probably the first show, and this is all up in the air, would be American Son. And with everything that happened yesterday in this country, how many people are going to want to come and see that when it's all right there in front of your face? So when I was choosing this, it was very relevant, and it still is relevant. But is it raw? Is it so raw that after the COVID-19 stuff, are people going to want to come and see this kind of subject matter? Or are they wanting to be entertained? This whole season was planned because of Jubilee and giving that 50-50 to, you know, those voices that are never heard. So those are the kinds of things that when I'm choosing a season, I'm always thinking about, I have to keep the doors open in a commercial space. I want to tell stories and push the boundaries. And I also want for the audience, I want to bring in new audience members by bringing in shows that take these risks, but I also want to keep my core audience and entertaining. And it's a fine line that you have to walk.
Patrick, you're running one of the oldest community theaters in the country, and I imagine that there's some weight carried with that responsibility. Not to put any extra pressure on you, but I mean, like, so what do you run into anything that's unique to that history when you're trying to plan a season?
Oh man, you know, I guess the answer is yes, but I think it's a good thing, like, because we have such a large volunteer community who really deeply cares about the work that we're doing. And so I do not lack for ideas that are presented to me of what we should be doing and the kinds of shows that people would like to see. I think that there's been a good balance since I've been here. I think that I've brought some kind of new voices to the table, which has been exciting, and the community's embraced a lot of that, you know, and the fact that, like, we've got to work with Joseph and Mike Wiley to premiere a thing here was like just beyond my wildest dreams, and that the audience really loved that show and really came with us. Like, I feel like we get to do a lot of different things, and we do get to take risks, and our audience will come with us. Of course, we choose responsibly. We don't choose things that we think are gonna alienate folks, unless, like, part of the goal of it is to, like, to create some alienation in order to tell a story that will then maybe help us come together. But, like, you know, it's just great to, and we have a little bit, like, to add to this conversation, something that's unique about, like, Raleigh Little Theater, but community theater in general, is part of the season selection process for me is thinking about what opportunities are available for our volunteers. So, like, if we have, like, maybe we have a season and I go, like, oh, I'm really excited about this season, then I take it to the production team and the costume departments, like, there's nothing in this season that's going to allow us to teach our costume volunteers, like, a new technique. So I know you were thinking of this other show, and that's a period show. Can we put that in so that we have an opportunity to further educate our volunteers? So we're always thinking about not only content and theme and how to push the boundary, but also, like, what are our volunteers going to learn if they get to work on this show? So that's just kind of another element for us that's important. And we are a little bit, like, you know, because we do operate as a community theater and it's volunteer based, we have an opportunity that I think it's harder for the professional theaters, which is, like, for us, we want the cast size to be as big as possible, right? Because we want as much opportunity as possible. And so, you know, that opens up a lot of scripts to us that, like, you know, that aren't possible always for professional theaters, because cast sizes are, you know, important considerations for professional producers. So we get to kind of think of all of those things as we're selecting stuff.
And Patrick, I just want to say about Patrick, I just want to say that Raleigh Little Theater today is not the Raleigh Little Theater that I grew up with. And with all due respect to what it was for so many years, the work that you and Charles have done, I mean, just in the title selection alone, it's wonderful. And talking about taking that theater into a new era, you have been such a Pied Piper, and I have such incredible respect for that, and I'm not alone. So, job well done.
Thanks so much.
You're here on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
I just chime in because it's just I guess a sidebar, is that as street signs, we do one-ups, and sometimes that feels like you create a theater each time you do a new show. So for me at this point, and based on the times that we live in, if the play doesn't feel, and I think people have said this before, but if the play doesn't feel essential to the moment, like it means something that's really important. And that doesn't mean it can't be entertaining or funny. It just means that it has to be really essential for us in the world we live in. I don't think I'm getting old enough where I don't think I can spend my time on something that I would think would be just frothy or fun. And that's not to say that we shouldn't do frothy and fun work, we should. But for me, it's got to shake the ground, and it's got to go in deeper in subjects than otherwise people would otherwise experience. The next play we're going to do is a Jim Grimsley play that's brand new, and we were looking for a play about global warming. And yet, whenever you do a play about something, it's difficult to make it also art. And Jim Grimsley is one of those playwrights that you can be assured that when you read his play, it's going to be artful. And this play, he writes also futuristic novels. So this play exists in the future. It's the most extraordinary play I've read on the subject of global warming. And so we're going to do it in the spring if we can all convene in the spring as a group of audience, whether audiences convene. So I feel like those are the things that, that sort of motivate me in my choices. Is it's got to mean something. It's got to be essential. It's got to be important.
What type of theater do you all feel like is underrepresented here? Like what could we be doing more of? What should we be doing more of in town? And that includes, like in town, I mean, like all this whole area, Triangle area.
Well, I'll start, I guess.
Yeah.
I think, like, to be honest with you, I think that, like moving here 5 years ago, I feel like I just walked into like being super impressed by this community, by the Triangle community, and feeling like, man, there's just so much opportunity. There are so many people making creative stuff, from like watching kind of Bear Theater do really site-specific work, to like, just like, the stuff that Sonorous Road was choosing, and now you've got Pure Life, and I love that Kenneth is running Agape, and like, and then we have like, Theater Raleigh, North Carolina Theater, and Joseph at Street. No, there is a lot of really, really interesting work. I think, like, for me, and just in my own kind of looking around, and I should mention, I think Women's Theater Festival, they're like bringing some really fringe authors and writers, and they're just doing some cool stuff. So I think that the community does have a lot of great in it. For me personally, some of the aesthetic that I miss that I really love is like really physical based theater, like theater of physical metaphor, and like like dance theater. I know that it exists here. I just haven't seen a ton of it, and I think that we have an opportunity for some more of that. And also, like, I think really and I think Women's Theater Festival is covering this area quite a bit, but I feel like, really postmodern, like new absurdist kind of work, I don't see a lot of that. And I'd love to see people playing with those ideas. So that's just my 2 cents, but I'm also really proud to be a part of this theater community, because I think it's really rich. And I do think that there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of distinct voices that make me really happy to be a part of it.
You know what? If I'm not producing, I'm going to North Raleigh, NRAC, or I'm going to Raleigh Little Theater, or I'm going to it was Sonorous Road, and now it's Pure Life. But man, I'm gonna tell you, Ain't Misbehaving at NRAC. I mean, both casts. I mean, it just blew me away, And I also saw my friend Connie over there when she was doing what's the name?
Lady Day.
Yeah, Lady Day. Senior moment, right? But anyway, yeah, and went to a play out in Durham, the Seagull, which was outdoors,
Mhm.
and one of my former students was in the play, but that was another experience. So there's a lot of good stuff going around. And again, Patrick is doing a wonderful job. I happen to have been on the Raleigh Little Theater board from 2003 to 2007, and like was it somebody just said, I think it was Eric, who said, you're doing a lot better shows. We weren't doing the kind of shows, you know, we had one here, one there, but now it's like all the shows are good. And so, yeah, I kind of like, and North Raleigh, I mean, not North Raleigh, I'm sorry, Theater Raleigh. And I'm friends with Elizabeth, and I come down there, Scottsboro boys. I mean, everybody's doing some stuff here in Raleigh, Durham area. So I don't know, maybe we could do more dance. I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give you a little secret. Hillside High School. My goodness, the shows that Window Tab does over there with the dance and the music and the orchestras, and first, it looks like Broadway. And I just get blown away. High school students doing this kind of stuff. But anyway, that's a commercial for them.
I would say, you know, we've touched on a lot of it. What really draws me in as an audience member these days are shows that, you know, represent more than just the typical representation that we see on stage, right? So whether it's transgender representation, you know, I've seen a show in London, and I'm interviewing someone tomorrow, just a little plug, from Anne Juliet, which has a whole transgender storyline. Jagged Little Pill has those types of stories in it. It's being able to see the people that are in our community, because our community's expanded. Well, they really haven't expanded. We're just becoming more aware of them. The folks were always there. So whether it's a story about those folks or those voices, or just a story about something else that includes those voices, I just want to see more of that, because that's what I mean. Honestly, if I rank the shows that are on top of my list, they all have, you know, again, it's not even about the message, it's about the inclusion of all the voices and the stories and the looks and the feels, you know, and then the sizes and the shapes and the colors. I mean, it's one of the reasons I love Come From Away. I mean, it's not your typical cast of people up on that stage. There's people that look like me, or you know, or things like that. You know, they're not,
Right.
you know, just all beautiful fit people. So I just think we need to continue to push, to strive to represent all the, you know, we had a lot when I was president of the board of RLT, we had a lot of conversations around, you know, including our community. And I think we just need to remember that our community's, you know, expanded and needs to continue to expand with the stories we tell.
I think that the diversity in the community is commendable as well. I don't know, Patrick, if I've had trouble in the Latinx community finding actors, finding that representation, because I have worked in my career with a lot of Latinx playwrights, and there's a lot of material out there, and I just find that I would like to sort of engage with that community more. And this may be an unpopular notion. I just feel like I would like to see a more, in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, a professional class of theater. I don't know if Lort is dead or not, but I just don't feel like enough artists get paid living wages. And to me, that's really an important part of the stratum of art in any community, is a healthy community in a vertical way, where there's a really healthy class of very professional theaters, and going down. If you look at where the Guthrie is, there's a lot of theaters in that community based on the population. So so when you think about large, well-funded theaters, it doesn't necessarily hurt. In fact, I think it helps the production of theater overall. And again, I just feel like sometimes in our community, we don't sort of value like the artists being paid a living wage, and I'd like to see much more of that in our community.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Joseph, because I mean, I feel like there are some key infrastructure pieces that are missing in town to help keep the arts kind of sustainable as a whole. I mean, the number of companies is really, you know, astronomical with the number of producing organizations in town. And a few of you have mentioned off and on is space. You know, Kenneth mentioned being able to extend a run that he couldn't do because he was renting a space from Burning Coal. I think space is a huge issue as well. I mean, NCT has a long history of producing at Memorial, but it's not, you don't
It's not
own that
ours.
space, right? It's
No,
not
no, no.
yours.
We enter the lottery 2 years in advance to barter for the time slots that we get because there's such demand, and that dictates when we can do our shows and what our season is.
Wow. And Joseph, you mentioned about your one-offs. I mean, that a huge part of that is probably finding the space.
Absolutely. I mean, we Bulldog, the new theater that sort of came out of the sprouts from Man Bites Dog, uses the fruit and produce company, which is, is a space.
Yeah, I mean, it's gritty like Man Bites kind of was, I mean, it has that kind of feel to it.
But you have to make sure you always do 2 trains running because you're going to. And
You're right.
But I think space is an issue. I'm working really hard in my position at the university to the Swain space, which I've done shows in that is connected with the Department of Communication. It's under repair and renovation, and I'm making the case that we really need more spaces on the university to do productions, especially developing new work around technology and live performance. So space is rare and an important resource that we should see more of. I also feel like the corporate community doesn't have the culture of supporting art that you will find more in the Northeast. Or
that is exactly right.
The corporate, the good citizenry about art and what it does for the community. I mean, I don't understand why there's a denial that the Triad stage totally changed downtown Greensboro. It just did.
Right.
Downtown Greensboro was dead, and after Triad, there was a life, there was business. I don't know the number of dollars per dollar spent in the theater, but I just feel like I don't know what we can do to change the culture and to sort of see how supportive the arts is central to being not only a good citizen but a healthy community. Anyway, I feel that's missing here.
Well, you know what? We need more spaces. I love the Gaddy Goodwin over at Raleigh Little Theater. I directed a show in 2013 there. I directed at Kennedy Theater, and Raleigh Little, not Raleigh Little, but Vernon Cole. But, I'm used to having, when I was in California, we had 4 spaces. We had a big theater for the Broadway type shows. Then we had the Thrust Theater. Then we had the small, black box theater, and then we had one for the students. But and I thought they were doing that at Northgate. Now Northgate is closed, but we need a space where we could rent, where you can do several different sizes of audience, because everything is not a big proscenium stage show. Some things are more intimate,
Right.
That's one reason I like Vernon Cole is that intimacy. You right there, the audience is right on top of you. You don't need microphones, unless you're doing a musical.
Well, that's like what Common Ground used to do, and
yes,
they had the space that you could just rent, and I know that we can't every theater company have a home? Like, I don't know, like that probably not. It's probably not feasible for every company in town to have their own space, but having something that can more easily embrace the companies that are looking for space would be really nice. And I just don't, it seems out of reach almost. Like, I don't know what steps we have to take to get there. And the the paying a living wage. I mean, I know that's a huge push in Durham right now. There's a big push in Durham to get that worked through their city legislation. So I don't know.
Tough. It's tough. It's tough because it's like renting or owning a house.
Right.
And of course it's wonderful to own a house. We pay rent, and we rent our space at in the Performing Arts Center downtown, whether we're in the Fletcher or Memorial. And it's tough. you know, but how to make that leap, like the cost of getting a space, how to
Right.
do that.
And for you, you do pay your performers,
Right.
but that's
Oh
also
yeah.
why you do 10 days of rehearsal, right? I mean, wouldn't you
Yeah.
prefer 4 weeks or
Yeah,
5 weeks?
we're 3 weeks soup to nuts, rehearsal, performance, all of it.
And I think,
3
you know,
weeks.
and I think, wouldn't you prefer though having more? I mean, it's just,
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And
Yes,
it's an
absolutely.
economic decision. It's,
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when I mean, you know, Theater Raleigh has those very short kind of rehearsal processes too. Usually it's like kind of 2.5 and 2 rehearsal to run. And sometimes when you work, like when I've directed shows for like Theater in the Park or Raleigh Little Theater, it's like you just have time. You just have all this time to like do whatever you want.
as long as you do it at nighttime, yeah.
As long as you do it at night, exactly. Yeah, there's no rehearsing during the day. So it's 6 o'clock, so we've been talking for about an hour. I feel as though we would be remiss if we didn't kind of we've been touching on the subject here and there, and I just feel like we should just kind of rip the Band-Aid off and talk about our current state. And I know there has been a lot of discussion online and a lot of discussion in the news and the media about theater and where it stands right now and its life, and how, some producers in New York, I think, just kind of went on record of thinking that 2020 is out, in terms of coming back. I know that everyone here has been affected by it in some way or another. I mean, where are we, and what do we do? How do we move forward?
I'll jump in. Because we perform in the 2,300 seat house and our productions are large scale for the most part, we are really watching the Broadway model very closely, and applaud all of the efforts to begin to open back up. And as facilities or theaters are beginning to explore ways, I've been on my soapbox. Well, what are they going to see when they get there? Because I don't know how you rehearse or how you perform. And so, and I say, if somebody would have figured it out, Broadway would be first, and I don't know what's going to happen in an immediate future. I think some of the recent articles today, yesterday, that have been in the Times, are really the most honest pieces, where they just say it's how do you do this right now? So that's the grim reality. We, North Carolina Theater, are not in a place to make an announcement. We are monitoring it very closely, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for large productions to be done for the rest of the year. I think there are ways and to do some creative things. And I think people are all brainstorming that to see what can be done. But theater is not dead. It will come back. It may be different forever. And even if it is, we will be the better for it. I really do believe that. But it might be a while.
I was on a Zoom conference this afternoon with Eventbrite, and how to transfer a show that's on their platform into a Zoom conference like show. And I guess people are doing that now, because we don't know when we can get back, and if we can get back, what it's going to look like. I asked some people if I did a show in August, and they said they don't think they would come. I mean, I don't know. So it looks like we are going online with stuff. And make another point, I'm a member of the African American Playwrights Group, and we read new works. And I happened to last Monday was stage reading a play on Zoom. So I had a character and other character, and then people were watching, and then we discussed the play and gave the playwright feedback. So I don't know, maybe we are going to be away from the theater for a while. I don't know.
Something's going to change, and I'm not sure we've figured it out, what needs
Well,
to change
I'm hoping.
exactly and transform. You know, readings, actually, I've done readings now with Zoom
Yeah.
too, and it may be the only thing that Zoom can do well in terms of theater. There's a thing that we call theater that's on a screen, and that's called movies. So I feel like the sort of this notion of reinventing theater telematically, unless there is some sort of, if you will, McLuhan-esque form content exploration of what it means to take liveness and put it, and you know, and transmit it, and what are the differences, and maybe there's something to learn in that as well, and maybe there's going to be a transition in terms of what we do or how we see theater from here on out. But I also think, you know, it will come back. It's just a question of when.
Yeah, when.
And I am personally really tired of seeing bad, what I call bad Zoom theater.
Well, you know, when we watch Zoom sometimes, and I thought it was very creative when you see a choir and all the people are at home and they're all on their different quadrants and they're all singing together, and the music, I mean, like, that's art right there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of technical know-how. I mean, that's the whole other thing. Exactly. Is like, how do you, I mean, you know, like this, the McGregor Hall in Henderson is doing this buyer and seller with Brian Westbrook, and they're going to film it with like multiple cameras, and as a fundraiser for them. I mean, that's, you got to have someone who knows how to like do that in order to take that leap to. So I mean, I applaud them for the effort, but I mean, not every theater is able to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, for the sorry, Justin. No, I was say for the most part, anything you've seen, like the choirs and stuff like that, is actually not live. It's all edited in the background. There's anything of good quality that you've seen, like the Hamilton video and all that stuff. I hate to pull the covers up, but it's all sound engineered and edited it together. So I think that's what we're struggling with right now. I'm not in the position that you all are that have to keep theaters open, but the show I'm directing was supposed to go up in June. It's a 4-person show. It's small. We're partnered with the city of Wake Forest. We're looking to push it out to the fall and just keep kicking the can down a little bit. Yeah. The good news is the space we're in there is huge and doesn't have fixed seating, so it can be very socially distanced if we get to that point where people are comfortable with that. But you know, we're like everybody else, just kind of wait and see. I did see the Old Vic today announce that I don't know if anybody else saw that, but they're starting live productions with cast in the theater, so not pre-recorded, where they're gonna sell their entire house as if it was an audience, 1,000 seats. They're actually have their ticket prices listed from £10 to 65 like they normally would. It's kind of pay what you can, and they're going to have a cast and a crew and run a live show, but without an audience. So they just announced that today. I think it's a 2-person. I think the first show they're doing is a 2-person show. So they're kind of one of the first ones that are looking to jump into that live for broadcast theater. Everything else has been like the National Theater and all that stuff has been stuff that they have in their archive. Yeah, stuff in their archive. So
I think that Vivian at Playmakers is now planning November with like the first production in November, and I think she thinks that's optimistic. She's now thinking about also broadcasting solo shows, including the one I directed there, as a way of sort of keeping people engaged with what they do. But I think, and a lot of theaters are announcing March, you know, as the start time. So, just there's a wait and see.
I think it's tough too with the wait and see and the kicking the can idea, because you want to do what you think is best. You don't want to make a rash decision and just like cancel it all. You want to make the safest decision. But like, I mean, are you thinking about what other people might say? Like if you just wipe your whole season clean in the interest of being safe, you know,
it's safety, but it's also commerce. I mean, we'll lose our shirts. Like if we put the amount of money that we put into to do a production and we have 100 people show up in a 2,300 seat house. We can't, and so I think that's the reality. We want nothing more than to do art during this time, but you have to think about the monetary aspect.
And you just touched on what I was thinking. We have a 96 seat house.
Yeah.
And when we have social distancing, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how many seats we could possibly even have a one-person show for. And is it worth us trying to get the rights to do a one-person show? All of that is in the works and trying to figure it out. But Jesse, no, I learned very quickly through all of this. It doesn't matter what people are going to think, because somebody's going to dislike what you do no matter what you do. So I learned to let that go very quickly.
It's going to be tough. Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough in this state, because I think, and we were talking about it in the meeting today, because the state is opening up quite quickly, and it's going to feel like all around the country that we're one of the last businesses that's, it's going to be interesting to see what sports does, but we're going to be one of the last to come back, to bounce back because of the nature of what we do.
I was going to say, I see a lot of really gruff men with guns coming to the theater and saying, "Open our theater up."
Be nice.
I do think, like, for me, yes to all of that, but like, I think that there needs to be, like, I think that I want audience members to hear from us too, that like, we spend a crazy amount of time thinking about you as an audience member and what we want to present to you and what we want to offer, like, as a communal offering to our community. That's what these stories are to us. They're not just like, they're not only commerce, although that's a part of it, but like, there's just so much time that we spend thinking about it. And so for like all of these theaters that you love so much, like, I guarantee you that theater artists see the audience as the completion of the circle, right? Like the seer is as important as the performer and the designers and all of that stuff. And like, it doesn't exist without that. And so when we make these crazy announcements, or when we have to cancel things that you're really looking forward to, you have to know that like, it has been an agonizing journey to get to that point. And the thing that you can do to be part of us is to hear us, because I think the other thing that like the general public, a lot of people are knowing because of their industries, but I think some people that I've talked to just don't understand like the guidelines for reopening a performance venue are insane. They're so hard. And so if we want to keep our audiences safe, we have to make decisions that are going to be rough and hard. And people, if they're able, being willing to like turn some ticket money into a donation and continue to support the theater is going to be, that's the way we're going to get through it. Is the community is going to have to realize that they are part of our organization. They are part of the cultural life of the community and the theaters that they go to all the time. And we're going to need them.
Absolutely.
And I think there has been a lot of community support. I want to say that too. They have been very helpful, but that's true. It has been agonizing for those of us who run a theater. I have lost a lot of sleep over trying to figure out how to keep people safe and do it correctly.
Right.
And you know,
also dealing. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You know, we have a older crowd. I have an older crowd that comes to my show, and they want to know they're going to be safe. And until we get safety measures in place, I mean, like Patrick was saying, I mean, like if I go to the theater and you don't have a mask on, and I do, and it's just, and people are traveling and don't know they got symptoms. They don't have symptoms, and they pass. And we've got to do something as a nation. This is not just North Carolina. This is a nation thing.
Yeah, and it's been said, but we think about the safety of the patron first. We're also dealing with unions. As a professional theater company, our bonded contract with Equity requires that we hire 18 equity members per production. 2 of those are equity stage managers. And the Actors Equity Union just issued a letter yesterday, but they're nowhere near saying that their members can go back to work.
Right.
They're monitoring the situation, but I mean, it's all on hold.
Yeah.
Well, I want you all to know that I appreciate all of the blood, sweat, and tears that have been put into the last few months of responding to this, and everyone that has had to make those tough decisions. You know, I value you all and this community, and I know that a lot of the people that will be watching this in the community, you know, we all want you to survive. Like you have to survive. So, you know, I just, it's just the unknown of it all is, I think, the killer really is
Yeah.
not knowing the how or the when. So, all right, enough about that.
Well, can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
If you haven't watched Lauren's interview, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, with Tom Gabbard from the Blumenthal group down in Charlotte, it was super informative. And he was talking about how a lot of the Broadway theaters are, and the Broadway League, he's a member of the Broadway League, are looking at Seoul, South Korea as an example, because they've never shut their theaters during this pandemic. Now everyone wears masks. They do tracking and tracing. They did have a 2-week period where Phantom of the Opera, 2 cast members came from another country and brought coronavirus, and they had to shut down for 2 weeks. But that's the only time their Broadway-style theaters closed during the entire pandemic. So there's a lot of studying going. So there's some hope out there. It's going to be a while, but I think there is some hope. I think the problem we have with our country is people's willingness to abide by the rules that people in Seoul, South Korea are maybe more willing to lie. But I would tell you, it was like the first interview that I heard in a while there. I heard some optimism from from a person that produces large shows. He also said unequivocally touring shows and Broadway shows will not open with social distancing. There's just no way they can financially do that. So
Also being 3 deep, you'd have to be at least 3 deep, like have 3 casts rehearsed, 3 spot ops, 3 sets of stage. I mean, it is insane, because somebody could show up at the stage door or show up at rehearsal, have a temperature, be sent home, not be able to rehearse that scene or learn that. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
And we have to acknowledge the political failure of this moment. The tracking issue and the monitoring issue is exactly what didn't happen from the get-go. And we are in this position because of just an incredibly fumbled political, you know, just our government failing us.
Well, in the interest of trying to end on a positive note, so I have a few kind of like lightning round questions as we're kind of in our last 10 minutes or so here, and I'm just gonna kind of pop them out, and we'll just kind of hopefully get some smiles back on our faces here. So, Patrick, what's your favorite play?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. My favorite play, my favorite theater production I've ever seen is De La Guardia Via Via in New York. That was my favorite thing I've ever seen. But my favorite play the experience that I ever had was Last Days of Judas Iscariot.
Where'd you see that?
At the Theater Alliance in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Eric, if you could direct one show for the rest of your career, what would it be?
Sleep No More.
Really?
I love that.
I wasn't drunk enough the first time I saw it.
Obsessed. I'm absolutely
Oh
obsessed.
yeah, I've seen it 3 times. It's incredible. Seen it. I've been through it 3 times.
I won't go again until you take me, because I need someone to guide me through that.
Yeah, I'll just push you in the right place.
Yes.
Kenneth, what's a show from your career that you would like to give another go?
Blues for Alabama Sky.
Oh, yes, nice job.
I did that with students, and I really want to do it with professional actors because they did a great job, but it's a 40s piece, you know, and professional actors would know the depth of each character a little bit more. But I'm still proud of my kids. I'm not saying they didn't do a good job, but that show really, with the set, and it's just, I love that show. I love that show, and I want to do it again. And I probably will do it again with professional actors. So we'll see.
Good. Tim, what's a show that you want to direct but you haven't yet?
Play or musical? I mean, everybody knows.
Right.
Okay, I'm ready to direct The Color Purple. Everybody knows that. Let's hope we're open by June of next year.
Yeah.
But I mean, I always want to do McNally plays. I would do Mothers and Sons. I want to do Lips Together, Teeth Apart. I would do Mothers and Sons again. You ask Eric, what would he do? I would do that show all the time. So.
Joseph, what is something that you hope your cast or your crew take away from productions that you're directing?
There's always a way to sort of reach deeper to a deeper truth, to just keep it's a never-ending process. You never stop working, and you always start, and you always dig deeper. And that, you know, the fact that it hurts, that's a part of what we do. It hurts because this is life and death, usually, the work that we do. And if it doesn't hurt somewhat, it's probably you're not doing it right.
Mike, what is well, I don't have a sixth question, so I'm going to recycle one.
Yeah, that's fine.
What's a show that you haven't directed yet that you would like to?
Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet.
Oh, good luck.
Joe Lee has to music direct it though, so it's a requirement.
Excellent.
Yeah, I can't outdo Rachel Chopkin, but I love that show, and I would love to do it.
So I'm also interested to know, just from everyone, what was the first show that you ever directed, and how did you get the gig?
You talking about a professional gig?
No. What was the first time that you were given a baton and they said, you should direct this show? Like, for instance, the first show I directed in town, at least, was Romeo and Juliet at Bear Theater in 2006, and I was like a child, and Carmen Manley said, "Here, you can direct this," and that was the first time that I felt like I called myself a director for the first time. Maybe that's more of it. When did you feel like you were able to call yourself a director on a show?
Oh.
Ooh.
The first one I did, my mentor handed me the baton, Joanne Bastian, and she said, "You have to direct Steel Magnolias," and that was my first time directing, and that's really when I knew I could direct. I directed Steel Magnolias, and I have loved it ever since. Loved the art of giving birth to a show.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll go. So the first one I did was Curious Savage, which Bob Baird I knew because I stage managed his daughter, and we stayed in touch, and he was crazy enough to entrust me. I think the first time I felt like a real director, for some reason, Patrick Taurus thought it was smart to let me direct a very large-scale musical, so which was Cinderella, which is, a complex show, and it's a big cast and a lot of moving parts and a professional creative team and all that stuff. So that was like kind of the first time I felt like I had to juggle a lot, and so yeah, so that.
Cool.
I think my first one, because I had done some real small one-act shows over at Shaw, but the one at Central in 2007, I directed Trouble in Mind, and I got professional actors to play the major parts and student actors to play the minor parts. But this is the first time I had to have a set built. Well, it wasn't a set built. Trouble in Mind is really taking place on a stage where they're rehearsing. But it was the first time that I had to deal with the lighting, the sound, the costumes, the whole works, and brought it all together. And it came out okay. But you know, you learn from your first experience like that. And I wish I knew what I knew now back then, right?
Yeah, right.
But I wanted to say one more thing. You asked the question, what show you want to direct? I really want to direct Shuffle Along. That's one of
Oh yeah.
that's my piece. This is a big musical. I really want to direct that. So one of these days before I hang it up.
Good. Thank you.
I'm gonna just answer like super honestly. The very first show I ever directed was that senior project in high school. It was a 10-minute play called Loyalties by Murphy Geyer. It was about blind patriotism and some of the dangers. And I did it in my little West Texas town. And this girl that I was interested in at the time, after her father saw it, he was like, somebody ought to take that kid and shoot him. And I thought, theater's badass and it's awesome. And like, if I can elicit that kind of response, then this is what I want to do. This is exciting.
All right.
It's not good for your personal relationships, however.
I directed. I went. David Wood at Theater in the Park. I had grown up doing work there, and I was an actor, and I thought I really wanted to direct. And I called and I asked if I could, and he said yes. I was out on tour with a play at the time, and he said, get something that hasn't been done. And so I went to New Dramatist on 44th Street. And I just sat and I started reading through plays, and I somehow landed on Nettie by Jeffrey Hatcher. And we did that. And I really cut my teeth because I was given the opportunity to do that there. And I think I first called myself director or felt like a director when I did Our Town, which is the best play.
It's a great play.
That was it.
I guess I had my high school experience too, Patrick, but I'll jump ahead. And the first play I directed in LA, which sort of then got me in a directing mode in Los Angeles for 15 years, I was asked to adapt and direct a book called The Trial of Anatoly Sharansky, who was a refusenik, a Jewish refusenik from Russia who they wouldn't let immigrate. So I adapted that book and created a big cast, and it was site specific in a synagogue in the hills in Los Angeles, and that was sort of the first production, and then I started doing lots of theater in Los Angeles. So
I love it. Everyone, this has been a real pleasure, a real treat to get to spend this 90 minutes with you all. And I appreciate you all taking the time to do it. I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to share. Lauren, I accidentally said the time wrong for the women's panel, didn't I? You can correct me.
It's okay. People were texting me, wait a minute, what's happening?
Sorry.
So the women are up next. They will be with us 7:30. 7:30, right?
Yay.
Live, another dynamic panel. And I just want to thank you, Jesse, for moderating this. I think it's much more sense for
Good job, Jesse.
moderate directors. And I have so much respect and admiration and love truly for all of you. And I just thank you for being here. And I'll be there at all of the opening nights.
Yep. I know.
Cheerleader, I'll be there with my virtual pom-poms or whatever it is.
And thank you, Lauren, for being such a champion for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Jesse.
Oh, your support.
Thank you. You know, I love the theater. That's my happy place. So we'll just keep on shouting about the theater until they let us get back into the theater.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you all. And please come back at 7:30 to hear what they're badass panel of women.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
So I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. Thank you again, everybody. If you came in late or joined us late, there were some kind of late questions on this panel, and I'm going to table those for the women's session. And then if you came in late, this will live on Facebook, on the RDU on Stage Facebook page, and it should be posted on their website tomorrow so people can see it in its entirety there. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Bye.